Liverpool, 1886. Well, we don't really know the date, but that one just sounded cool. Anyway, it's another dreary evening as rain continues to fall outside. There hasn't been a dry day in weeks. And for some patrons of Paddy's Pub, that sentiment rings true in multiple ways. This evening is like any other, with the lonely pub of loyal patrons packing in to forget their bleak existences for a short time, before eventually stumbling out into the rain, back to their jobs at the port. Paddy's Pub may not be anyone's favorite pub, but their loyalty has been hard-earned by the reasonable prices for a pint. And it's for that reason that amongst the noise of the crowd, we find our first two protagonists here ordering a couple of Paddy's flagons. This old chap here is Giles Poundstone. Originally from Liverpool, Giles was an unassuming schoolteacher and a mentor to a vampire slayer named Buffy. After she disappeared, Giles became a cleric, eventually working to spread the light of the Lord throughout sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, as we're joining him here in Paddy's Pub, he's just come back from a mission trip with his good friend. And here is that man. His name's Atumbo, or Otto for short. A slave trader from West Africa, Otto's origins are as mysterious as his reasons for his career, given his skin tone. Nonetheless, he was good at what he did, and he was presently finding himself enjoying the spoils of business, relaxing in civilized Liverpool for a change of pace, before shipping back out to the homeland to resume his work. From their booth in the back of the bar, Giles and Otto were peacefully enjoying their drinks when they noticed a barmaid being harassed by some football hooligans. They contemplated getting involved, but they were just too happy to be back in civilization, so they continued with their drinks, content to just watch the situation unfold. Eventually, when she could take no more, the barmaid asked if they would kindly go ahead and deal with her harassers to advance the plot, and our two adventurers decided to go ahead and comply. Otto and Giles injected themselves into the situation by bringing up football, a topic which they both clearly knew nothing about. Failing to calm them down following this line of dialogue, the hooligans, who had become more belligerent now, challenged our boys to a game of footy. To get the team up to the right number of members, the bartender named Paddy offered up his son Kieran as a third player. The threesome quickly proved to be outmatched in the game, with Giles having nearly complete ignorance of the rules of footy, and Otto and Kieran having glass ankles. Luckily, Kieran had the gift of youth and managed to score a goal even despite his shattered ankle. As the opposing goalkeeper tried to dive for the save, he hit his head on the goalpost and lay there for most of the rest of the game unconscious. Giles unfortunately scored an own goal, but victory was secured after Otto forced an own goal from the hooligans as well, at which point the biggest one, named Clive, ran up and punched Otto in a fit of anger. And at that point, the benches cleared and the fighting began. As his chance of winning had waned, the largest hooligan came up to punch Otto, and the benches cleared. Otto was holding his own on a shattered ankle. Giles was throwing punches. Trent got bent. Kieran nearly died. Owen was almost too concussed to join the fight. Clive got his ass beaten. Amidst the chaos, Otto found his weapons and threatened to shoot Clive and the hooligans. To this, he said, "Dirty Dan's gonna hear about this," and the hooligans ran off. After returning Kieran to Paddy at Paddy's Pub, the boys began talking about who Dirty Dan could be. Upon hearing that name, the expressions of the bartender and the barmaid immediately soured. They explained that Dirty Dan was a small-time criminal, but was still someone to avoid at all costs. As Otto and Giles remained determined to find him, Paddy at least offered them a bed for the evening and a breakfast the next morning in return for them healing and returning his son relatively safe and sound. The next morning, Otto and Giles downed some bangers and mash and donned some dock worker disguises and then promptly headed out to the docks to search for Dirty Dan. Otto and Giles were able to make some new friends at the dock thanks to a few conversation tips imparted to them by Patty. Thanks to these new friends, the pair was directed to the Cock and Eagle pub near the South Docks. It was where the Liverpool fans usually gather. The password to get in was Fuck Fat Andy. Otto joked that he had been saying that all day, and there was uproarious laughter. Later that day, Otto and Giles made their way towards the Cock and Eagle pub. It was clear from the guard outside that Otto really wouldn't fit in at this kind of place, so Giles did the talking. Inside the pub, it was relatively dark and deserted, except for a few patrons. As they stepped around the pub, Otto and Giles recognized one of the patrons. It was Owen, from the game of footy the previous night. Critically remembering the two, despite his concussion, Owen drew his sword and incited the other patrons to join him in killing Otto and Giles. Otto and Giles, not yet comfortable using their own weapons for some reason, decided to use the weapons of their enemies instead. After looting the room and healing up, Otto and Giles prepared to go through the door back to what they assumed would be Dirty Dan's office. As Giles kicked the door open, he and Otto were met with the sight of Dirty Dan sitting at his desk and a large-breasted woman standing next to him. Without a second, or really even a first, thought, Otto let fly an arrow right into Dirty Dan's chest. As Dirty Dan began to stand, the large-breasted woman flipped deftly and made her way over to the two adventurers, brandishing her daggers. Otto continued to fire arrows as fast as he could at Dirty Dan's chest. Dirty Dan broke the arrows as they landed, but the third arrow staggered him a bit. However, he had just enough strength to take out his pistol and shoot Atumbo, knocking him down and putting him out of the fight. Suddenly, finding himself at very bad odds, Giles resisted the large-breasted woman's voluptuous temptation and cast Sacred Flame to finish off Dirty Dan. He then returned his focus to the large-breasted woman. This proved to be a large misstep, as she continued to reveal more and more of her cleavage to distract him. Fortunately, he came to his senses long enough to beat her to death with his trusty Mace Windu. And as she collapsed to the floor, Giles, overcome with gentlemanly impulses, helped her gently down to the ground, and as she did so, she whispered to him, "My name is Chloe, by the way," as she died in his arms. After stabilizing Otto and tying up Dirty Dan, Otto and Giles took a moment to loot the room. Otto acquired the Big Iron from Dirty Dan. As Dirty Dan's consciousness began to fade, the pair slapped him awake and interrogated him about Cliff or Clint or whoever the hell that hooligan was. Editor's note, it was Clive. Dirty Dan squealed on everything and even told Otto and Giles they could loot his safe in his office, exchange for sparing him his life. They did so, but as they left the room, they quickly and painlessly smashed Dirty Dan's head in, killing him. Just as they finished Dirty Dan, the lights flickered and went out, then returned, but more dimly, revealing a cloaked, pale man in the corner. He said that he had watched their adventures and instructed them to take the road 5 hours north towards Scotland before disappearing, leaving only a sack full of 15 gold and a letter which read, "Hail to thee, of might and valor. I, a lowly servant of Barovia, send honor to thee. We plead for thy so desperately needed assistance. The love of my life, Irina Kolyana, has been afflicted by an evil so deadly that even the good people of our village cannot protect her. She languishes from her wound, and I would have her saved from this menace. There is much wealth in this community. I offer all that might be had to thee and thy fellow, if thou shalt but answer my desperate plea. Come quickly, for her time is at hand. All that I have shall be thine. Signed, Kolyan Indrirovich, Burgomaster." Feeling a certain sense of calling to the north, and having nothing left written for Otto and Giles in Liverpool, the duo chartered a carriage and departed towards Scotland. As they traveled, they fell tired and dozed off in the back of the carriage. Eventually, they awoke and felt a strange sensation. The carriage was not moving. Looking around outside, they were met with the sights of a dirt road, dead and desolate woods, and the horses and carriage driver lying on the ground dead. After investigating the immediate area, Otto and Giles noticed a large gate in front of them, which beckoned them to pass. With a dense and eerie fog around in all other directions, the two decided to continue on. As they passed through, the gates swung shut behind them and refused to open. Up the road away, Otto and Giles were attacked by a pack of wolves. Thankfully, with a ranger in their party, they were able to dispatch the wolves without too much bodily harm to themselves. After that, they continued down the path, wondering what awaited them. After ages of walking, a small town slowly began to appear out of the fog. They had arrived in the village of Barovia. Otto and Giles walked through Barovia, hardly able to tell whether it was day or night. As they approached the first set of buildings, they spotted a noteworthy-looking gentleman. He introduced himself, and that is our next main character. Originally from the hidden African civilization of Bedum, Mbappe was living a pirate life of sorts, which brought him to the Caribbean. There, he found an island covered in fog, and as he and his men approached to take a closer look, they found themselves suddenly in this strange realm of Barovia. After stopping to talk to him, the party learned that he had also received the welcome of the wolves, and that the wolves had killed his friends Leroy and Captain Jack. He explained that he had not found a way to leave this strange place, and it seemed to be impossible. Wandering into the mist simply caused one to be transported back to Barovia. The introductions of the newly formed party were soon interrupted by the sight of an old hag pushing a rickety cart up to a house, knocking on the door, and taking a boy from the crying parents who answered the door, and putting him in a sack. The party was able to learn that the boy was taken for payment, and that his parents regretted the situation very much. In the hopes of pleasing the mother, they walked right over to the old hag and demanded the son back. She claimed that the boy was payment for her dream pastries and tried to entice the party to partake in them. Given the situation, the party decided to not try them. After a roughly 20-minute conversation about whether to kill the hag or not, done right in front of the hag's face, of course, the party eventually settled on just threatening to kill her drug supply chain instead. She told them what a wise decision they had made and began to stroll off, hoping to avoid being inconvenienced by the party ever again. As the party returned the boy to his parents, they asked what led him to being taken by the old hag, and the mother explained that dream pastries are incredibly addictive. They are the only way to bring a bright moment where one can escape the horrible land in which they find themselves. And once you capture that moment without the pain of your daily existence, it's hard to avoid becoming addicted. After bidding her farewell, the party made a plan to work towards replicating the dream pastry recipe for themselves. But, for now, they had more important matters, so they turned and pressed onward into the town. Walking around the muddy streets of Barovia, the party failed a boot check, and Otto's boot became stuck in the mud with no way of getting it out. Fortunately, the party shortly thereafter came upon two businesses, Bildrat's Mercantile and Blood on the Vine Tavern. The party first went to the mercantile store, where they met the owner, Bildrat. Scratch that, it was Bildrath Cantemir. Anyway, his name wasn't important. What is important is that he sold the party garlic bread. Wait, no, scratch that. It was garlic braid. Anyway, that's not important either. Well, it should be, but the party kept forgetting that they had it. So. And at this point anyway, they didn't even know Strahd was a vampire, which, shit, sorry, that's a spoiler. Forget I said that. Anyway, don't worry about this whole thing. All you need to know is that the party bought 3 garlic braids from the increasingly frustrated merchant, and then they departed across the street to the tavern. As the party went across the street to the Blood on the Vine tavern, they noticed that the N had been scratched off and replaced with an F. The party wondered about what Blood on the Vife tavern could possibly mean, before eventually a divine voice stepped in and clarified that it was Blood of the Vine tavern. They entered, fully ready to antagonize another innocent merchant. The party asked the bartender for rumors, but they were told, "There are no rumors here." So Otto responded by demanding facts. At that moment, the bartender directed their attention to a brooding man sitting in the corner of the tavern with snow-white hair. As the party locked eyes with the mysterious figure, they knew that he would likely be very important to them, and possibly could be the long-sought-after source of an advancement in the plot. And so, the party bid the bartender farewell and departed towards the corner of the tavern, towards the mysterious gentleman.